On her 18th birthday, seated across the dinner table with a cake from her preferred bakery in Scottsdale before me, she delivered her words as if they were well rehearsed. "The most valuable present you could bestow upon me, Roland, would be if you vanished permanently from our family." My wife, Shanna, seated beside her, didn't flinch, didn't rebuke her daughter for her harshness, didn't protect the 8 years I had invested in our home. Instead, she acknowledged it and seemed to exhibit a mixture of relief looking at me. "Brianna's biological father has resurfaced," she said. "He'll assume responsibility now." In an instant, I stood up, placed my napkin on the table, and responded simply, "All right." In the subsequent months, what transpired? After selling the house we called ours, dismantling every financial plan I had established for Brianna's future, walking away from that dining room without a glance back, what remained behind in the vacant house when everything was settled? It took them by surprise, and it will likely catch you off guard too. If this narrative resonates with your experiences giving selflessly to individuals who deemed it insufficient, click subscribe immediately, leave a comment below, indicate your presence, and like this video. The story I'm about to share deserves to be heard. My name is Roland Mercer. I am 49 years old and specialize in developing commercial real estate in Phoenix, Arizona. This includes office parks, mixed-use corridors, retail establishments along the 101. I have been engaged in this endeavor since my early 30s, growing the business from a solitary strip mall acquisition on Mesa's east side to a portfolio, now worth more than most will accumulate across 3 lifetimes. I'm stating this not for your impression, but for relevance to future discussions. I don't take hasty or impulsive decisions, especially when finances are concerned. I approach situations thoughtfully and carefully, understanding the value of assets versus liabilities. Regrettably, I applied this mindset late in my personal life. 8 years ago, at a charity event for Phoenix Children's Hospital, I encountered Shauna Calloway. She was 36, a marketing director for a mid-sized tech company in Tempe, known for her sharp wit and ability to command a room without it appearing as work. At the time, she had a 10-year-old daughter named Brianna, a bright child, reserved, who preferred reading thick paperback novels in the corner at events rather than seeking attention from adults. I found this quality about Brianna appealing instantly, as she showed no inclination towards seeking attention. Derek Sawyer, Brianna's biological father, had been mostly absent since she was 6 years old. He moved to Denver following his divorce from Shauna, remarried swiftly, had another child, and faded away. He would call on holidays when it occurred to him, made sporadic child support payments, left a void that felt more noticeable than any presence he provided. Shauna and I developed a serious relationship within approximately a year of meeting. I moved into her rental house in Chandler shortly after that. A year later, I proposed marriage. We got married at the Hermosa Inn in Paradise Valley on a stunning autumn day. I was content. I truly felt like I was meant to become a father, not as a replacement, but as an addition. I never aimed to be like Derek. I never asked Brianna to call me dad, never pressed for that conversation, never strived to outshine a man who had willingly excluded himself from comparison. Instead, I strove to be dependable, constant, and present. Attended every parent-teacher meeting. Drove her to volleyball practice at 5:30 a.m. when she was in 7th grade, as the school only had gym access then, and the coach believed Shauna showed real potential. Spent hours in bleachers during club tournaments in Peoria, Gilbert, and Queen Creek, cheering louder than most spectators as I watched my child spike a volleyball. Established a college savings account for her when she turned 12, making regular contributions without ever mentioning it to her. This was simply something I felt responsible for providing, given her future needs and my capacity to offer it. Paid for her braces, driving lessons, junior prom dress which cost more than my first car. All these actions were taken not as a means of gaining affection, but because she was living under my roof, I cared for her mother, and that's what one does for a child. Initially, I assumed that's what you were doing. However, the problem began when Brianna turned 15. Derek reappeared not in a grand manner. There was no reconciliation scene at an airport, no tearful goodbyes or reunions. Instead, he started calling more often than texting, and eventually visiting Phoenix a couple of times a year. He took her out for dinner, to the movies, even to a Suns game once. I believe he was making an effort, as men who have been absent for too long often do when guilt finally catches up with them. They overcompensate by offering experiences rather than showing up consistently. Brianna enjoyed it, and I understood that. Nevertheless, I noticed that each time Derek visited, Brianna seemed to grow more distant towards me. Spending time with him made her realize she had a true father, which in turn relegated me to something inferior. She began to skip family dinners on certain occasions, instead addressing our home as your house, when speaking to friends on the phone audibly enough for me to hear in the hallway. These were minor occurrences, but I convinced myself they were typical teenage behavior. Shanna was working through her identity, and Derek's return had added complexity to her self-image, necessitating time for reflection. Shanna's coping mechanism was to pacify the situation. She was skilled at that, always presenting a serene facade even when underlying currents were strong. She would reassure me with comments like, "She's just going through a phase, Roland, don't take it to heart." I'd acknowledge her words and move on, not wanting to be the self-centered stepfather who made everything about himself. During those years, there were several instances where Shanna said things to me that I've reflected upon often since then. One instance was when I returned home to find Brianna had held a small gathering while we were out for dinner. It wasn't significant, just a handful of friends, some underage drinking. Following our discussion with Brianna about trust and responsibility, Shanna approached me privately. "You should remember," she said, "that you're not her father. You don't possess the same authority." I stood motionless as she spoke. "I'm the one paying the mortgage in this house, which grants me some authority," I replied. Shanna shook her head, suggesting I had misconstrued something. "Allow me to handle Brianna. Focus on your tasks instead," she advised. I chose not to argue. In hindsight, I should have. When Brianna turned 17, Derek started visiting frequently as he divorced his second wife. Their child from that marriage lived with the ex-wife in Denver. In his newly acquired spare time and freedom, I suspect he had gained some insight, though it remains uncertain. Derek and Shanna dined together on 2 occasions, privately discussing Brianna's future. Shanna shared details of these encounters with me, maintaining openness. However, there was a shift in how she spoke about Derek during those months that stood out, an emergence of gentleness not previously present, a propensity to defend him when I would comment on his absence spanning 4 years. "People can change, Roland," she'd respond. Over time, I noticed subtle changes. Shanna's phone turning face down whenever I entered the room became a habit, which was not common before. There were moments when she'd fall silent for an unusual length when I asked about her whereabouts. The unusual occurrence of Derek's name in discussions where it didn't previously appear, his thoughtfulness about certain matters or his insightful comments regarding others. As a real estate developer, I analyze risk indicators for a living. I know when financial figures in a deal are misaligned, and I can detect when someone is selective with the information they disclose. Shanna was manipulating me, yet I chose not to challenge her directly. This may sound peculiar. However, I've had enough negotiations to understand that revealing knowledge too soon results in losing one's advantage. I waited, watched, and recorded events, not for the sake of gathering evidence, but to gain a complete understanding before making any decisions. The full picture, when it became clear, revealed this. Derek and Shanna were spending time together without my knowledge. I couldn't prove any physical encounters had occurred, and to be honest, by the time I realized this, I doubted that such events were the primary concern. I was aware that my wife had been emotionally attached to another man for months, keeping it hidden from me. Our daughter, who had witnessed this unfold, had formed her own predictions about our household's future. Brianna's 18th birthday was on a Saturday in early March, with Phoenix already feeling the premature heat of March, not yet summer's intensity. I picked up the cake from a bakery in Old Town Scottsdale she adored, named Sweet Republic, known for its exquisite multi-layered desserts that were almost too beautiful to consume. I made reservations at her favorite restaurant for later in the evening. I purchased a MacBook Pro as a gift since she was entering her senior year and would require it for whatever lay ahead. Our plan was to eat dinner at home first, followed by cake, presents, then an evening out. This was the schedule we followed. We took our seats. Shanna prepared Brianna's preferred dish, chicken piccata, and balloons adorned the chairs as a customary touch by Shanna. The birthday cake stood on the counter. Brianna's phone lay beside her place setting, a common sight among teenagers. I slid the MacBook box towards her. "Happy birthday, Brianna." She examined it, then me before uttering her statement. Not hastily, but deliberately, not the words of an impulsive teenager. These were premeditated words, well-thought-out words. Words that someone had decided to express. "The best present you could ever offer me, Roland, is if you'd simply vanish from our family permanently." The kitchen was silent except for the refrigerator's hum and a balloon swaying subtly from the vent. I glanced at my spouse. Shanna stared at Brianna for a brief moment, then turned to face me. "Brianna's biological father has resurfaced in her life now," she said. She acknowledged it as if they mutually agreed on a reasonable course of action. I remained still for 3 significant moments which I've often revisited since then. In those 3 moments I sensed a subtle shift, an unobtrusive closure, not a slam but a quiet, firm shutting with a gentle click. I laid my napkin on the table. I rose from my seat. "All right," I said. I picked up the MacBook box. I exited the kitchen. I traversed the living room. I departed from a house bearing my name as mortgagee. I climbed into my vehicle, and I drove off. I wish to emphasize what followed, for people hearing this tale sometimes presume my actions were fueled by anger. They were not. I was guided by clarity. That evening I navigated to the Biltmore district and booked a room at the Arizona Biltmore Hotel. There I sat pondering the circumstances meticulously. Legally and financially, the situation was relatively straightforward. We had a prenuptial agreement, which Shauna had initially accepted, even jokingly stating it was characteristic of me. The house, bought prior to our marriage, bore my name only, with Shauna's name added later. My business assets were held in entities established well before I met her. Our combined finances needed untangling, but nothing disastrous. The college fund for Brianna was managed through accounts exclusively under my control. It had never been transferred to Shauna or Brianna. I intended to gift it when Brianna began school, a transfer that hadn't taken place yet. I contacted my attorney, Patrick Hale, a family law specialist from an office on Camelback Road, who I've worked with for over a decade on business matters. I reached out to him at 9 p.m. that night, and as he promptly answered the call. I shared with him the incident and my intentions. "You comprehend," Patrick replied cautiously, "that from a legal perspective you owe Brianna nothing at all. She is not your biological child. There's no formal acknowledgement of step-parent rights. The college fund the accounts, they belong solely to you." "I am aware," I responded, "and that includes the house." "I understand," he said. "What is your preferred timeline for action?" "Promptly," I said, not out of vengeance, but decisively. Patrick remained silent for a moment. "All right," he said. "Give me a few days to arrange the sequence." I refrained from returning to the house during those initial 3 nights, then 7 in total. The Biltmore was my destination. Its design has been influenced by Frank Lloyd Wright. I've likely driven past it tens of thousands of times in my lifetime and never stopped. This time, however, I ordered room service, visited the gym, worked on my laptop, and allowed Patrick to take care of his affairs. Shauna texted me just twice during those first 3 days. 4 days passed since Patrick sent the separation papers, and I put the house up for sale without responding to either question posed earlier. You should know about the Arcadia neighborhood of Phoenix where we resided, a scenic area with Camelback Mountain nearby, mature orange trees, and houses that usually sell within 2 weeks in a normal market. However, this wasn't a typical market. It was a seller's market with minimal inventory, high demand from California buyers, and my 4-bedroom, 3-bath home in excellent condition after 2 renovations over 8 years. I listed the house on a Wednesday, receiving 4 offers by Friday. On Saturday, I agreed to a sale above the asking price at $47,000. The same day, Shauna received the legal notice concerning the listing. Patrick had strategically planned it out. My phone rang within a quarter of an hour, which I allowed to go to voicemail. Her message was over 2 minutes and 40 seconds long, a duration I never heard. I discarded it and blocked the number. Over the ensuing 6 weeks, I unwound 8 years of joint finances. The college fund, amassed from 4 years' worth of contributions, a significant amount was liquidated. The funds were redirected to my operating accounts. This decision did not sit well with me, and I want to be transparent about that. Brianna was a young woman on the brink of needing that money for her future. The person within me who had cultivated that fund did so out of genuine concern for her. Dissolving it felt like retribution for words she'd spoken, and I grappled with this discomfort for quite some time. However, I also pondered over this matter. The woman who informed you that your lasting absence would be the most precious gift conveyed a genuine sentiment. She shared her feelings honestly, indicating she wished to exclude me from her life. A college fund is a present one offers within a relationship. That bond, however, had been unequivocally and decisively severed, not by me but by her. I respected her wishes. I discontinued the monthly grocery delivery service I'd established 2 years prior for the house when Shauna's schedule became hectic. I deleted my name from the utilities bills and transferred them to Shauna's name, which she would need to pay from her personal income. I removed myself as the authorized driver from the car insurance policy covering the vehicle I purchased for Brianna upon turning 16, a dependable Honda Civic without any frills but still safe. The car was registered in my name, and I organized its pickup. These actions were not malicious. The events unfolded as expected after departing from a household that instructed my departure. I wish to emphasize one additional point. Derek Sawyer would continue the matter, according to Shauna's statement. Therefore, I eagerly awaited seeing Derek Sawyer take charge. The house closing occurred on a Tuesday morning at a title company situated off Scottsdale Road. This was an unremarkable deal. I completed the documents and surrendered the keys. The purchasers, a couple moving from Los Angeles, were delighted. Shauna and Brianna had 30 days, starting from the offer's acceptance, to leave. They stayed until day 29. I know this because the real estate agent I collaborated with, Diane, who I had worked with on investment properties for years, was overseeing the process and kept me updated. She informed me that Shauna made several inquiries to the listing office regarding flexibility in the timeline, but there was none. I'm aware because Diane informed me that during the post-vacation inspection, the house was in a good state. They hadn't intentionally destroyed it or stolen items that didn't belong to them. Instead, they left it as I had always kept it. However, there was something I had intentionally left behind that they did not take. This was on the kitchen counter, prominently displayed. The first item was a MacBook Pro, still in its original packaging, with a card bearing Brianna's name atop it. Since whatever transpired between the adults in that house, she was 18 and starting her senior year, requiring a computer. I had purchased this for her so she could have it. The second item was a 2-page letter addressed to Shayna. While I won't read the entire content here, I will share what my closing statement was. For 8 years, I strived to be a part of your daughter's life that she has now made clear she didn't want. I understand this and hold no ill feelings towards her for it. She was truthful, and truth demands respect even when it causes pain. Allow me to clarify my thoughts. The man who traveled 40 minutes to fetch her birthday cake, who watched her volleyball games in the sweltering August heat, who saved money monthly so she could attend college debt-free, that man was genuine. He existed. Regardless of how our roles in your family were defined, he was not insignificant. I wish Derek can fulfill all her needs. I hope both of you are well. There will be no further communication from my end. Lastly, a copy of the first photograph ever taken of me and Brianna together at the Phoenix Zoo was left behind. She was 10 years old, laughing at something I'd said in front of the giraffe habitat. The image captured her happiness. I couldn't recall what I had said then, but it didn't matter. In that photo, she seemed content. For years, the photo remained in a frame within my home office. I left it upright on the counter, wedged between the laptop box and an unopened letter. I'm unsure if Shauna touched anything or if Brianna read the letter, opened the computer, or glanced at the picture. I chose not to concern myself with that knowledge long ago. Some goodbyes are simply final. That was 14 months past. This is my current state. I sold the Arcadia house and invested the earnings in a penthouse condo along the Biltmore corridor, a location undeniably close to the hotel where I spent my first week. The symmetry appealed to me. The apartment boasts floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Camelback Mountain. Each morning, I enjoy my coffee while watching the sun rise above that mountain, and I must confess, it's among the most delightful experiences I've had. My business is thriving. Recently, I wrapped up a substantial mixed-use development project in Tempe from Fall, a deal I had been working on for 2 years, which exceeded expectations in its initial quarter. Currently, I'm collaborating with a partner on a new venture along the light rail corridor in downtown Phoenix, an experienced developer named Andre whom I've known for quite some time, and with whom I am eager to create something. I have tentatively begun contemplating my future personal endeavors as I am no longer 79 years old. I am not going to allow the incident with Shauna to transform me into a person who withdraws from life. Such an action would give them a victory they do not deserve. I've gone on several dates, nothing serious so far, but I have become more open than I thought possible following that event in March. And there is something about that night I have pondered numerous times over the course of my life. Brianna suggested that my absence would be the best gift she could receive. Her assertion wasn't malicious, not an insult, not a judgment of my worth as a person. But in a pragmatic sense, my departure was indeed a blessing for me. The life I lead now, the understanding I have now, the autonomy I enjoy, all these would be absent if I had persisted, if I had pleaded, if I had bargained for a place in a household that chose to exclude me. At times, the most potent action one can take is to believe someone literally. She wished me away. I departed. And in my departure, I regained everything. The sole burden I bear, truthfully, something that still weighs heavy at times, is the 10-year-old girl at the Phoenix Zoo, giggling at a joke I can't recall, standing beside a man who would attempt to provide her with stability and love for the next 8 years. I hope she thrives. I hope she makes it to college. I wish her newly formed family with her mother and Derek brings her satisfaction. May she someday realize that steady, unassuming love, untouched by drama, is valuable, even at 18, enraged and convinced of someone else's superiority. Let her discover this before it's too late. Her journey, however, isn't for me to narrate. Mine has already progressed into a fresh chapter, marked by the sunrise over Camelback Mountain, a steaming coffee, and an entirely personal view. Now let me be frank. Roland didn't lose. He voluntarily withdrew from a dispute for a place at a table that no longer desired his presence. As I see it, the harshest act towards someone who cherishes you isn't to despise them. It's to make them doubt the authenticity of their love they held initially. Brianna instructed, "Vanish," Shanna agreed, and Roland, he finally paid heed to his own voice. For 8 years, he silently appeared, covering expenses like braces, birthday cakes, and college funds without ever being acknowledged. When it concluded, he didn't plead for recognition. He merely departed, taking his self-worth with him. This isn't aloofness, it's self-respect. If you're observing this narrative and find similarities with your own experiences as Roland, someone who's been generously giving to people who continually devalue you, perhaps his tale is attempting to convey a message. You don't have to be told to vanish. You can decide to walk away instead.